They say a man's voice can move cities, shift crowds, even start revolutions. But what kind of teacher demands the opposite, that his followers remain silent for 5 entire years? The story begins with a question that haunted the ancient world. Why did the great philosopher Pythagoras, the man credited with shaping Western mathematics, music, and mysticism, force his students into a vow so extreme many never emerged the same again? And more terrifying, what was he hiding behind that silence? The ancient city of Croton, in 530 BCE, was buzzing with rumors. A mysterious figure from Samos had arrived preaching harmony, purity, cosmic order, and a secret knowledge he claimed descended from the gods themselves. He called it the rule. Citizens whispered that he could hear the music of the heavens. Others claimed he could control animals with a word. Some even believed he possessed a power stolen from the priests of Egypt, where he had studied forbidden rituals. But none of these stories were as chilling as what happened after he founded his school. At the gates of the Pythagorean community, carved into the wooden arch, was a single command: let no untested voice speak. Every initiate, no matter their age, wealth, or brilliance, was told the same words the moment they stepped inside. 5 years of silence. Obey or leave. Imagine it. Young scholars, noblemen, even warriors, men who once commanded armies or debated in public forums, reduced to mute shadows. For years, they moved through the compound like ghosts, unable to speak a single thought aloud, forbidden even to whisper their own name. Why? Some believed Pythagoras feared spies. Others thought it was a test of discipline. But there was another theory, one so dangerous his own followers refused to write it down. A few ancient writers hinted that the silence was not a test at all. It was a shield protecting the world from what Pythagoras was teaching behind the inner doors, what he called the divine number, a structure of reality so powerful that one misused secret could bring disorder to the cosmos. The city noticed something strange. Those who completed the 5 silent years emerged, changed. Too calm, too obedient. Some even said their very eyes looked different, cold, reflective, as if they had abandoned the world of ordinary men. Not everyone survived the vow. Some disappeared without explanation. And one night, a frightened initiate tried to escape the compound, claiming he had witnessed something inside the dark chamber, a room no one was supposed to enter during the vow. The next morning, the man was found at the edge of the city, eyes open, lips sealed in death. The elders said he died naturally. The citizens of Croton did not believe them. But we must go back, to the beginning, to the moment Pythagoras unveiled his rule, to understand why silence was the price of knowledge, and why breaking it meant more than exile. It meant annihilation. The first thing new initiates noticed wasn't the silence. It was the eyes. Dozens of students, all dressed in plain white cloaks, moving without a word through the courtyards of the Pythagorean compound, each one glancing only briefly at newcomers before returning to their rigid routines. Their eyes seemed trained, conditioned, as if they were all following some unseen rhythm, a rhythm only Pythagoras could hear. The school had been built on the outskirts of Croton, but it felt like a different world entirely. The gates shut behind every new arrival with a heavy thud, and from that moment on, they were bound by the teacher's most feared command: speak not until your soul is ready. At dawn, they gathered in the outer hall, standing in complete silence as the first light touched the marble floors. They walked to lessons without speaking, ate their meals without speaking, studied geometry, astronomy, and music, still without speaking. Even at night, no whisper was allowed. Pythagoras believed sound shaped the soul. A wrong word, he claimed, could corrupt the harmony of the cosmos. So he demanded purity first, silence first. To break the vow was not simply to break a rule. It was to disrupt what he called the tetracties, the sacred triangle of 10 points he believed created the universe itself. It was whispered among older followers that Pythagoras used silence to wipe the mind clean, a way to erase the ego, the past, perhaps even the will. But there was another reason, a darker one, whispered only in secret. Silence protected them from the forbidden lesson. Inside the compound were two worlds: the outer circle, where silent initiates lived; the inner circle, where the chosen few, those who survived the vow, were finally allowed to hear Pythagoras speak. The inner circle was said to contain the dark chamber, a candlelit room filled with symbols older than Greece itself. Markings some believe came from Egyptian priests, others from Babylonian star scribes. No initiate was allowed near it. One night, a young initiate named Milan, once a gifted orator in Croton, snuck close to the inner circle doors. Desperation had consumed him. After 3 years of silence, he felt his mind unraveling. He needed answers. He needed to know why he was being kept voiceless, day after suffocating day. He pressed his ear against the door. At first, he heard nothing. Then, something impossible. Not voices, not chanting, but a low, pulsing vibration, like the hum of a distant instrument struck inside the earth. The sound traveled into his bones. His hands trembled. His teeth rattled. Something primal inside him screamed to run. But before he could move, a soft voice came from behind him. "You are not ready." Milan turned. A hooded elder was standing in the shadows, his face barely visible. Yet what terrified Milan was not the elder's presence, but the fact that the elder had spoken aloud. A forbidden act. Before Milan could respond, the elder placed one finger over his lips. "Break the vow," the elder whispered, "and the master will unmake you." Milan tried to speak regardless, his first real word in years, but his throat refused to form sound, as if the very rule had become part of his body. The next morning, Milan was gone. Not transferred, not expelled. Gone. Some initiates claimed they saw his cloak folded neatly outside the inner circle. Others said they saw him in the city, wandering the streets with blank eyes, unable to remember his own name. All agreed on one thing. He had tried to hear what no untested soul was meant to hear. The silence, the rules, the rituals, everything was designed to prepare initiates for something unimaginable. And deep within the compound, the inner circle was preparing for the night when Pythagoras would finally reveal it. The night they would be allowed to hear the truth behind the divine number. But something else was happening in Croton. Politicians were growing suspicious. Rival philosophers were calling Pythagoras a fraud. An unseen anger was building around the school. And soon, the silence inside the compound would collide with the noise outside it, in an eruption that would change the fate of every follower. For nearly 5 years, the compound of Croton had existed like a world sealed under glass, silent, unmoving, untouched by the chaos of the city surrounding it. But on the eve of the 5th year, something changed. The silence trembled. It began at dusk, when the initiates gathered in rows under the fading orange sky. For the first time since their vow began, the elders walked among them carrying oil lamps, placing one before each initiate. A symbol, a signal. The elders did not speak, but every initiate knew what it meant. The time of revelation was close. Inside the inner circle, the inner chamber had been prepared for the ritual known only as the listening. The day when Pythagoras would reveal the teachings said to be too dangerous for unprepared minds. The divine number. A secret he claimed was the blueprint of reality, the structure behind the world's harmony, the cycle of life, and even the movement of the stars. But outside the compound walls, a different kind of gathering was taking shape. Citizens of Croton had begun whispering about the school's influence. Merchants claimed Pythagoras was manipulating council laws. Priests accused him of introducing foreign rituals. Some believed the silence itself was a sign of something unnatural. Croton had tolerated philosophers. It did not tolerate cults. And Pythagoras' school, with its layers of hierarchy, its mysterious oaths, its secretive initiations, looked more like a cult than a community. That night, while torches flickered through the streets, a small group of politicians met in a private hall. At their head was Silon, a wealthy nobleman once rejected by Pythagoras himself. Silon had not forgotten the humiliation. He wanted revenge, and he knew the city was ready to listen. "The man teaches darkness," he hissed to the council. "He claims divinity. He steals our youth. He hides behind silence. Tell me, what honest man hides knowledge in chambers? By midnight, the decision had been made. They would send men to search the Pythagorean school. Not a polite inspection, an intervention. Inside the compound, the initiates felt none of this. They stood, oil lamps glowing at their feet, as Pythagoras finally appeared. The master, clad in a simple white robe, barefoot, illuminated only by the moonlight. His face was calm, almost unervingly serene, as if he already knew what was unfolding outside the walls. He raised one hand. The elders bowed. The initiates, silent for years, felt their hearts hammering like drums. Then he spoke. His first word in 5 years, spoken only to those who had survived the vow. Listen. The compound seemed to breathe. Even the crickets stopped. He gestured toward the inner chamber. Tonight, the chosen initiates would step inside. Tonight, they would learn the truth behind the universe's harmony. Tonight, the silence would break and be replaced with something else. But before the first initiate could move, a thunderous crash shook the wooden gates. Torches appeared outside. Dozens of them. Voices shouted. Metal clanged. The compound was under assault. The initiates froze. Some stepped back in fear. Others instinctively covered their lamps. Only Pythagoras did not move. He whispered, almost sorrowfully, "The noise has come." The gates splintered. Silen's men burst into the courtyard, shouting accusations of heresy and corruption, demanding to see the inner circle. The initiates looked to Pythagoras, expecting anger or command. Instead, he simply whispered, "Do not speak, no matter what they say." It was then the soldiers noticed the initiate's silence and mistook it for defiance. Within minutes, chaos erupted. The men began dragging initiates aside, shouting questions, demanding answers they would not give. Some initiates fell to their knees, shielding their ears. Others stood frozen, clinging desperately to the vow that had consumed their lives for years. The silence had become their nature, their identity, their prison. And as the courtyard descended into turmoil, silence strode toward the inner chamber, intent on destroying whatever secret Pythagoras was hiding. The master stepped into his path. "Turn back," Pythagoras warned softly. "There are things in this room the unprepared mind cannot endure." Silence laughed. "No more tricks. Tonight, the world hears what you've been hiding." He shoved the doors open, and what he saw inside was nothing like the rumors. No gold. No treasures. No idols. Only a single symbol carved into the stone floor, glowing faintly with lamplight, the tetractes. 10 points, arranged in a perfect triangle. But beneath it, something far more disturbing waited in the darkness, hidden until the moment the doors opened. And the moment Silence saw it, he stepped back in horror. What rested in the center of the chamber should not have existed. Silence staggered backward. The soldiers who had pushed in behind him froze, their torches flickering as if disturbed by an unseen wind. Even the initiates at the courtyard entrance felt something shift, an invisible pressure, a trembling in the air that made their chests tighten. Because in the center of the inner chamber, illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps, sat an object no one expected. Not a relic, not a weapon, not a scroll, but a sphere, perfectly smooth, perfectly black, reflecting no light at all. A sphere so flawless it seemed to swallow even the shadows around it. Pythagoras stepped beside Silence, his voice calm, almost mournful. "This," he whispered, "is the reason for your silence." The soldiers looked confused. Silence scoffed. "A stone? All your secrecy for this?" Pythagoras shook his head. "Not a stone. A ratio made solid. A number made matter. The closest thing the human hand has created to the structure of the cosmos." He gently placed his palm on the sphere's surface, and it responded. A low hum filled the chamber, vibrating across the stones. The tetractes etched on the floor pulsed with light, faint, but unmistakable, like a heartbeat waking after centuries of sleep. The initiates gasped silently. The soldiers stepped back, silent, unsettled but unwilling to show fear, forced a grin. "Magic tricks," he spat. "Illusions. You prey on the weak-minded. But tonight your secrets end." He turned to shout an order, but Pythagoras spoke again, softly, deliberately. Do not raise your voice in this room. Sound is not your ally here. The soldiers hesitated. Silent did not. He stepped onto the carved tetractes. The chamber responded violently. A sudden, deafening vibration blasted through the air, but not as sound. It was pressure, a crushing wave that hit Silent's chest and flung him backward onto the floor, gasping. His torch clattered away, extinguished. The sphere pulsed once, like the echo of a struck drum. The soldiers panicked. Master, one of the elders cried. Pythagoras remained still. Numbers have harmony, he said, and disharmony. The world is held together by delicate proportions. Even a single step in the wrong place disrupts the order. Silent struggled to his feet, his face twisted with rage and fear. You're playing with forces you don't understand. Pythagoras's eyes hardened. I understand them too well, which is why you were never permitted inside. Behind him, the initiates had gathered, watching in terrified awe. Some clutched their oil lamps so tightly the clay cracked beneath their fingers. Silent pointed at the sphere. Seize it. The soldiers hesitated. Every instinct in their bodies screamed not to touch the thing. The sphere hummed again, deeper, stronger. One soldier, desperate to prove his courage, stepped forward and reached out. His fingertips brushed the surface. A flash of white exploded up his arm. He screamed, an unnatural, choking scream, and collapsed to his knees, clutching his hand as if it had been plunged into fire. The smell of singed flesh filled the chamber. The initiates recoiled. Even the elders stepped back. Silent's voice trembled. What have you built here? Pythagoras exhaled slowly. I built nothing. I merely revealed what already existed. The universe sings in ratios. But to hear that song fully, his gaze drifted over the silent initiates. One must first destroy the noise within. The vow suddenly made sense. Or at least part of it. But Silent wasn't listening anymore. He saw only the fear in his soldiers' eyes, the growing unrest outside the compound, the power shifting out of his control. And so he made the decision that would doom them all. Burn it. The word cut through the chamber like a knife. Burn the school. Burn the chamber. Burn everything he's built. The soldiers, shaken but obedient, rushed out to gather torches and dry timber. Flames began to rise in the outer yard, casting violent shadows across the walls. The initiates panicked for the first time in years, their vow falling apart under the weight of terror. Some tried to flee. Others shielded the sphere. A few clung blindly to the vow, refusing to utter even a cry for help. The silence that once united them was now shattering piece by piece. Pythagoras turned to the elders. It is time. They nodded grimly. But before anyone could act, a roar of flames surged through the courtyard as the first fires caught the wooden beams. Smoke rushed into the inner chamber. The walls trembled. The sphere pulsed one last time. Longer, louder, deeper, and something in the earth itself seemed to answer it. The harmony was breaking. The silence was dying. And with the fire closing in, the initiates realized the truth with horrifying clarity. The vow had never been the challenge. Surviving what came after was. The flames climbed the wooden beams of the courtyard like living creatures, crackling, hissing, devouring everything the Pythagoreans had built. Smoke thickened the air, rising in violent curls toward the night sky as terrified initiates scattered in every direction. For 5 years, the compound had known only silence. Now it was drowning in noise, shouts, crackling fire, collapsing timber, clashing weapons. The vow was broken, and with it, the fragile order Pythagoras had spent decades constructing. Inside the inner chamber, the black sphere pulsed again, slow, deep, almost mournful, like a heartbeat fading. Pythagoras stood before it, calm even as embers drifted through the doorway. His robe flickered in the rising orange light. The elders gathered around him. One whispered, "Master, the city will destroy everything." Pythagoras shook his head softly. "No, it is not the city that destroys. It is ignorance, disharmony." Behind them, several initiates coughed violently from the smoke, their years of silence shattered by raw instinct. Others clung to the walls, shielding the sphere as if it were a child. Silent re-entered the chamber with 4 soldiers, his face flushed with heat and triumph. "It ends tonight," he declared. "Your silence, your secrets, your power, everything." But Pythagoras did not look at Silent. His eyes were on the sphere. "It was never power," he said quietly. "It was warning." The chamber rumbled. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Silent took a step back. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Pythagoras replied. "It is the world that reacts. You struck at a harmony you do not understand." A beam outside collapsed with a thunderous crash. Flames illuminated the walls. The soldiers flinched. Then something happened that none of them expected. The initiates began to speak. A single voice, cracked, trembling, rose first. "Master, what do we do?" It was the first spoken word the boy had uttered in 5 years. Another voice followed. Then another. Whispers at first, like a dam breaking. Then a rising tide of voices, panic, confusion, pleading. The vow was gone. Pythagoras closed his eyes, as if absorbing the sound in all its chaos. "It is no longer silence that binds you," he murmured. "It is choice." Silent laughed harshly. "Choice? They follow you blindly." But even as he said it, he could see truth cracking through his own words. Some initiates ran toward the gates. Some tried to save the scrolls. Some stood frozen, unable to choose anything at all. Pythagoras turned to the elders. "Take them," he said. "Lead them out through the eastern path." One elder hesitated. "Master, what of you?" Pythagoras looked once more at the sphere. "My work ends tonight." The elders bowed deeply, then gathered the terrified initiates, ushering them out through a hidden passage behind the chamber's rear wall. Silent stepped forward, sword raised. "You're not going with them." Pythagoras did not move. "No," he said softly. "I belong here." The sphere pulsed again, louder, sharper, and the flames outside seemed to recoil for a moment, as if pushed back by an invisible wave. Silent hesitated. For the first time, fear broke through his anger. "What is that thing?" he demanded. Pythagoras finally looked at him. "It is the closest any human has come to the sound of creation, the ratio behind all things, the harmony that binds existence." He stepped toward the sphere. "Without silence, no mind can endure it." Silent's eyes widened. "You hid it because you feared us." "I hid it," Pythagoras replied, "because the world was not ready." The chamber trembled again. Cracks snaked across the ceiling. Smoke poured in from every corner. Silent pointed his sword desperately. "Step away from it." Pythagoras kept walking. "You cannot kill what you do not understand." Silent lunged. But before his blade touched the philosopher, the sphere pulsed. A final, resonant wave that rippled through the stone floor. Silent's sword shattered. The soldier was thrown backward against the wall, collapsing in a heap. The glow of the tetractes brightened one last time. The sphere's humming deepened, not violent, not explosive, but harmonic, like the final chord of a song older than the stars. Pythagoras touched it gently. And in that moment, the chamber gave way. The ceiling collapsed, beams and smoke raining down in a blinding torrent of fire and dust. The flames swallowed the room. Outside, the initiates reached the hillside and looked back at the compound, now a blazing inferno against the night. One elder whispered, voice trembling, "Silence was not his rule. It was his shield." Another added, "He tried to protect us from what he knew." The initiates stood together on the hill, smoke rising behind them like a funeral pyre. Some wept. Some stared blankly. Some whispered broken fragments of prayers they barely remembered. One young initiate, a boy who had been only 12 when he entered the vow, asked quietly, "What do we do now?" The eldest among them placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now," he said softly, "we speak. But with care. The world has enough noise." The flames consumed the last of the Pythagorean school. The sphere, the divine ratio, the forbidden lesson, was never seen again. But the initiates who survived carried fragments of its truth into the world. Some became philosophers. Some became mathematicians. Some became wanderers, speaking in riddles. And some never spoke again. They understood, more deeply than anyone, the price of breaking harmony. The city of Croton would later claim Pythagoras died in the fire. Others whispered he escaped. Some said he dissolved into the very harmony he had studied. No record agrees. But one question remains, echoing across history. What happens when a truth too powerful for silence is released into a world ruled by noise?